The highlands around Hebron rise beneath the pale morning light with a quiet gravity that settles across the terrace slopes, illuminating a landscape shaped by fortified settlements, ancient trade routes, and the slow rhythm of pastoral life during the Middle Bronze Age. Stone walls built from massive cyclopean blocks dominate the ridge above the valley, their foundations preserved through excavations at Tel Rumeida, where archaeologists uncovered layers of occupation stretching back more than 4,000 years. This is the environment in which the death of Sarah unfolds, not as a mythic episode, but as a moment rooted in the cultural, legal, and material realities of a region whose history is preserved through its stones, its burial sites, and the enduring memory of its inhabitants. The settlement known in antiquity as Hebron served as a strategic center in the southern hill country, its elevated position offering control over trade routes linking the Negev, the Judean highlands, and the central ridge. Excavations reveal domestic structures, storage installations, and fortifications dating to the Middle Bronze Age, providing a tangible backdrop for the narrative setting. The presence of large public buildings and defensive walls indicates a community of considerable importance, one capable of supporting trade, diplomacy, and interactions with surrounding pastoral groups such as Abraham's household. The death of Sarah at 127 years. While framed within the genealogical traditions of the patriarchal narratives, intersects with cultural practices surrounding age, memory, and burial in the ancient Near East. Genealogical ages and ancient texts often served symbolic or literary functions. Yet they also preserved the memory of individuals whose lives spanned long periods due to social status, environmental factors, or the preservation of ancestral tradition. The emphasis on Sarah's age underscores her significance within the household and reflects a cultural pattern in which the matriarch's death marked a moment of transition for the clan. The mourning practices described in the narrative align with customs documented across the region. Texts from Mari, Ugarit, and Egypt describe formal periods of lamentation involving weeping, wailing, and the gathering of family members to honor the deceased. Archaeological evidence from burial sites across Canaan reveals offerings of pottery, jewelry, and personal items placed alongside the dead, reflecting a belief in the importance of memorializing the individual within the context of the household and community. These practices provide a cultural framework for understanding the significance of Sarah's death within the broader social structure of the time. The decision to secure a burial site reflects a tradition deeply embedded in ancient Near Eastern society, where family tombs served as anchors of identity, inheritance, and continuity. Clan-based burial caves appear throughout the Judean hill country, their entrances carved into limestone slopes and their interiors divided into chambers designed to hold multiple generations. Excavations at sites such as Khurbat el-Dakam, Silwan, and Tel Halaf reveal burial caves with benches, niches, and ossuary spaces that mirror the architectural features associated with the Cave of Machpelah. These structures provide a tangible parallel to the type of burial site Abraham sought for Sarah. The negotiation for the cave occurs within a legal framework consistent with Hittite and Canaanite land purchase contracts preserved in ancient texts. Documents from Hattusa, Ugarit, and Nuzi describe formal transactions conducted at the city gate, witnessed by elders and recorded through verbal declarations or written tablets. These contracts often included clauses specifying the transfer of land, trees, structures, and associated rights, reflecting a comprehensive approach to property ownership. The narrative's depiction of a public negotiation aligns with these legal traditions, grounding the event in the documented practices of the Middle Bronze Age, as Abraham stands before the inhabitants of Hebron. The fortified city rises behind them with its massive stone walls and terraced slopes, reflecting a world preserved through archaeology and the enduring traces of those who lived within its boundaries. The moment emerges not from legend, but from the intersection of cultural customs, legal structures, and the material evidence of a region whose history is etched into the landscape. The highlands fall into a quiet stillness as the negotiations begin, the weight of Sarah's death settling across the camp and the city alike, marking the beginning of a moment preserved through both text and the archaeological record. The negotiations unfold at the city gate, a location consistent with administrative practices documented across the ancient Near East, where elders gathered to witness legal transactions, resolve disputes, and formalize agreements that shape the economic and social life of the community. Excavations at sites such as Tel Dan, Hazor, and Megiddo reveal monumental gate complexes with chambers, benches, and open courtyards designed to accommodate public assemblies, reflecting a civic architecture that aligns with the narrative's depiction of a formal gathering in Hebron. These structures served as the administrative heart of the settlement, anchoring legal proceedings within a space recognized for its authority and visibility. The interaction between Abraham and the Hittite landowners mirrors legal customs preserved in Hittite and Canaanite documents, where property transfers required public acknowledgement, verbal declarations, and the presence of witnesses to ensure legitimacy. Tablets from Hattusa describe negotiations conducted with elaborate courtesy, including offers of generosity that masked firm expectations of payment, a pattern reflected in the narrative's exchange of formal politeness and strategic positioning. These texts reveal a legal culture in which land sales were both ceremonial and transactional, requiring precise language to establish ownership and prevent future disputes. The mention of a field, trees, and a cave reflects the comprehensive nature of ancient land contracts, which often included not only the primary structure but also the surrounding property and its natural features. Documents from Nuzi and Ugarit specify the transfer of orchards, boundary stones, and associated rights, indicating that land ownership extended beyond the immediate burial chamber to encompass the broader landscape. The narrative's emphasis on acquiring the entire parcel aligns with these legal traditions, grounding the transaction in practices widely attested across the region. The cave itself corresponds to burial architecture documented throughout the Judean hill country, where family tombs were carved into limestone slopes and designed to accommodate multiple generations. Excavations at sites such as Siloam, Khirbet el-Kham, and Tel Halif reveal burial caves with benches, niches, and side chambers arranged to hold bodies laid out for primary burial before later being moved to ossuary spaces. These multi-chambered structures reflect a cultural emphasis on collective burial, where the dead were interred alongside ancestors in spaces that served as both tombs and symbols of familial continuity. The Cave of Machpelah, traditionally associated with the burial of the patriarchal family, exhibits architectural features consistent with these regional burial practices, while the monumental structure that stands above it today dates to later periods. The underlying cave system reflects the double-chamber design characteristic of Middle Bronze Age tombs. Geological surveys confirm that the limestone bedrock beneath Hebron contains natural fissures and cavities suitable for modification into burial spaces, providing a plausible setting for the type of tomb described in the narrative. The weight of 400 shekels of silver aligns with economic values documented in ancient Near Eastern texts. Silver served as a primary medium of exchange during the Middle Bronze Age, measured in shekels and used for land purchases, dowries, and commercial transactions. Tablets from Mari and Ugarit record land prices ranging from a few dozen to several hundred shekels depending on size, fertility, and strategic importance, placing the narrative's figure within a realistic economic range for a burial field located near a major settlement. The mention of merchant's weight reflects standardized measures used to ensure fairness in trade, a practice confirmed through the discovery of balance weights and scales at sites across QAnon. The formal acceptance of the price and the public acknowledgement of the transaction reflect the legal finality required to secure property rights in the ancient Near East. Witnesses played a crucial role in validating agreements, and their presence ensured that the terms could not be contested by future generations. The narrative's emphasis on the presence of the sons of Het aligns with this legal necessity, grounding the event in the documented procedures of Middle Bronze Age property law. As the negotiations conclude, The fortified city of Hebron stands behind the assembly with its massive stone walls and terraced slopes, reflecting a world preserved through archaeology and the enduring traces of those who lived within its boundaries. The moment emerges from the intersection of legal customs, burial traditions, and the material evidence of a region whose history is etched into the landscape. The field and cave now belong to Abraham, secured through a transaction consistent with the legal and cultural practices of the time, marking the beginning of a burial tradition that would shape the identity of the household for generations. The field of Ephron stretches across the slope with a quiet stillness shaped by centuries of agricultural use, its soil marked by the faint traces of terracing, boundary stones, and seasonal cultivation practices documented throughout the Judean hill country. Archaeological surveys reveal that fields surrounding fortified settlements like Hebron were often divided into parcels owned by prominent families, their boundaries defined by standing stones or natural landmarks that appear in both textual records and material remains. These markers served as legal indicators of property rights, ensuring that land transfers such as the one described in the narrative were recognized by the community and preserved across generations. The cave at the edge of the field reflects a burial architecture deeply rooted in the cultural traditions of the Middle Bronze Age. Limestone formations across the region contain natural fissures and cavities that were frequently expanded into multi-chambered tombs, their interiors carved with benches, niches, and recesses designed to hold bodies during primary burial. Excavations at silwankerbatel.com and Tel Halaf reveal tombs with double chambers, a feature consistent with the meaning of Machpelah, which ancient tradition associates with a two-room structure. These caves served as family burial sites, accommodating multiple generations and reinforcing the continuity of lineage within the landscape. The preparation of Sarah's body aligns with burial customs documented across the ancient Near East. Texts from Mari and Ugrit scribe washing, anointing, and wrapping the deceased before placement in the tomb, while archaeological evidence reveals the presence of oils, perfumes, and textiles used in funerary rituals. Pottery vessels found in burial caves often contained aromatic substances, reflecting a cultural emphasis on honoring the dead through sensory and symbolic practices. These customs provide a historical framework for understanding the care given to Sarah's body before its placement in the cave. The act of placing the deceased on a burial bench corresponds to the architectural features uncovered in Middle Bronze Age tombs. These benches, carved directly into the limestone walls, served as platforms for primary burial, allowing the body to decompose naturally before the bones were later gathered into ossuary spaces or side chambers. This secondary burial process, documented through both archaeology and textual sources, reflects a cultural emphasis on familial continuity, where the remains of ancestors were preserved together within a shared tomb. The presence of Abraham at the burial aligns with patriarchal responsibilities documented in ancient Near Eastern legal and social structures. Texts from Nuzi and Mari describe the role of the household head in overseeing funerary rites, securing burial property, and ensuring the proper interment of family members. These responsibilities extended beyond the immediate act of burial to include the maintenance of the tomb, the protection of its boundaries, and the preservation of its legal status within the community. The narrative's depiction of Abraham fulfilling these duties reflects a historically grounded pattern of familial obligation. The location of the cave near Hebron situates the burial within a region rich in archaeological evidence of long-term settlement. Tel Rumeida, identified with ancient Hebron, contains layers of occupation dating to the Middle Bronze Age, including fortifications, domestic structures, and storage installations that reveal the city's significance as a regional center. The proximity of the burial site to such a settlement reflects a cultural preference for interring the dead near established communities, where tombs served as markers of identity, heritage, and territorial presence. The field and cave acquired through the formal transaction become the first permanent property owned by Abraham's household in the land, a detail consistent with ancient Near Eastern practices in which burial sites served as anchors of territorial identity. Archaeological evidence from across the Levant reveals that family tombs often remained in use for centuries. Their entrances sealed and reopened as new generations were added to the lineage. These tombs functioned not only as resting places for the dead, but as enduring symbols of a family's presence within the landscape. As Sarah's body is placed within the cave, the quiet gravity of the moment reflects the intersection of cultural customs, legal structures, and material practices preserved through the evidence of the ancient Near East. The burial emerges not from mythic abstraction, but from the lived realities of a world where death, memory, and land ownership were intertwined within the fabric of society. The entrance to the cave is sealed with a stone, its placement marking the beginning of a burial tradition that would shape the identity of the household for generations, preserved through both text and the archaeological record. The entrance stone settles into place with a muted finality that echoes across the terraced slope, sealing the chamber carved into the limestone and marking the beginning of a burial tradition, deeply rooted in the cultural landscape of the Middle Bronze Age. The cave's interior, shaped by natural fissures and human modification, reflects the architectural features documented in family tombs across the Judean hill country, where benches, niches, and secondary burial spaces preserve the remains of multiple generations within a single ancestral chamber. These structures serve not only as resting places for the dead, but as enduring symbols of lineage, identity, and territorial presence, anchoring families to the land through the physical permanence of their tombs. The field surrounding the cave becomes part of this memorial landscape, its boundaries defined by natural markers and legal recognition secured through the public transaction conducted at the city gate. Archaeological surveys revealed that such fields often remained associated with specific families for centuries, their ownership preserved through oral tradition, boundary stones, and the continued use of the burial cave as a generational tomb. The narrative's emphasis on the field, trees, and cave reflects a comprehensive approach to property rights consistent with ancient Near Eastern legal practices, where land ownership extended beyond structures to encompass the broader environment. The burial of Sarah within the cave aligns with funerary customs documented across the region, where the dead were interred in multi-chambered tombs located near settlements or along the edges of agricultural fields. Excavations at Silwan, Tel Halif, revealed tombs positioned in similar contexts, their entrances facing outward toward the landscape and their interiors designed to accommodate the remains of extended families. These burial sites served as focal points for memory, ritual, and identity, reflecting a cultural emphasis on the continuity of lineage within the physical geography of the land. The presence of Abraham at the burial reflects the patriarchal responsibilities documented in ancient Near Eastern texts, where the household head oversaw funerary rites, secured burial property, and ensured the proper interment of family members. These duties extended beyond the immediate act of burial to include the maintenance of the tomb, the protection of its boundaries, and the preservation of its legal status within the community. The narrative's depiction of Abraham fulfilling these obligations aligns with the documented social structures of the time, grounding the moment in the lived realities of Middle Bronze Age households. The region surrounding Hebron provides a historically plausible setting for the burial. Tel Rumeida, identified with ancient Hebron, contains layers of occupation dating to the Middle Bronze Age, including fortifications, domestic structures, and storage installations that reveal the city's significance as a regional center. The proximity of the burial site to such a settlement reflects a cultural preference for interring the dead near established communities, where tombs served as markers of identity and as physical anchors for families whose movements often followed the rhythms of pastoral life. The cave's double-chamber design, reflected in the meaning of Machpelah, corresponds to burial architecture documented across the Judean hill country, where multi-room tombs accommodated both primary and secondary burials. Geological surveys confirm that the limestone bedrock beneath Hebron contains natural cavities suitable for modification into such structures, providing a plausible physical context for the tomb described in the narrative. The enduring association of the site with ancestral memory reflects a cultural pattern in which burial caves served as long-term repositories of identity, linking generations through shared interment within a single sacred space. As the burial concludes, the highlands around Hebron fall into a quiet stillness shaped by the weight of tradition, the permanence of stone, and the enduring presence of those who once lived within the fortified city and its surrounding fields. The moment emerges from a world preserved through archaeology, comparative texts, and the material evidence of the ancient Near East, reflecting a historical landscape where death, land, and lineage were intertwined within the fabric of society. The cave stands as a testament to the cultural and legal structures that shaped the lives of Middle Bronze Age families. Its sealed entrance marking the beginning of a burial tradition that would continue across generations. It's preserved through both text and the archaeological record.